We've just launched a new update to our content optimization module, which I think is quite significant, and I think a few of you will be interested. So if you've not seen this content optimization module, you get to it either by creating a new brief in your dashboard, or you can create a new brief from within a project. Within a project, it'll have these comparisons, so comparing your own content to the content that's already optimized for any particular phrase. So this is a content brief for the phrase Wales activities. And the first thing that's changed here is that we've got a readability ease, which is the Flesch-Kincaid readability test. We run that over the project as well, so you can get an idea of how good it is, and also search engine understanding, which is something in beta, and we think this is pretty cool. It compares the number of topics that Google's API sees versus the number that we see. And if you want to get some numbers for these and you've already got a report that's out there, then you may just have to redo the analysis, and I'll just come back to this page in a second, but just redoing the analysis is going to start creating those scores. So if I now expand, there we go. So now the readability ease has come in. Interestingly, with this particular content, Google hasn't understood any of the topics or concepts, so it's actually got a search engine understanding of this page is 0, it would seem. But we'll come on to that in a little bit. So what's happened that's different here? Well, all sorts of things. The first thing is that even though before we had masses and masses of topics, so these are the topics that we think anybody should be writing about if they're trying to write for the phrase Wales activities. They definitely need to be talking about Snowdonia, they need to be talking about sea, beautiful families and Welsh and those kind of things. And things you can dive in now, and as you could before, and have a look at the kind of copy questions that are there. So there's a lot of information about questions and stuff. And if you think, you know what, I need to talk about this in my report, you can click this add button. So remember the phrase Snowdonia, which is, and that is going to add it to your content brief. Okay, so you can also do it from over here. So I'm also going to add the idea of mountains into the content brief. So that's great. I can then, as I do that, my editor will start updating with information. I'll come on to the editor information next, I think. So the editor has got so much richer now. So this, as before, brings in the text that was here before, and so you can get an idea of the text. But then it starts to give me all sorts of other bits of information. So it starts to feed in content that we might want to write. From this point here, brief overview. So the brief overview will come in and say, right, we've processed a bunch of things. We've got some words, and we've got the readability ease and the other metrics that you've got up on the top here. And this is sort of now a collapsed version of this data. So that's in your brief here now, and you've also got a bunch of sources of where you think there's some good information, and Wales Online, TripAdvisor, Visit Wales, etc. And if I go back to here, you've got Wales Online, TripAdvisor, Visit Wales, etc. So you can see, so your content writer can now see quite happily who's ranking for these phrases and where their information is coming from, and then we can start to have a look at the topics and see what's happening and what isn't. So we've got our competitors on average are using the concept of activities 9 times, and per page 7 times. We've got the concept of traveller and hotels and campsites. Competitors using it, 2 times, 2 times, 2 times, and then my number of average usage per page is just once. So maybe I want to start to talk about that. And that's in the concept of travel and tourism. Then in the concept of health, I want to start talking about sight and foreign and sweat and well-being, not so relevant. Exercise, these are things that are relevant to Welsh holidays, but actually not as relevant necessarily as the concept of Wales. So we're adding a lot of information about what you need to add to make your content better here. So it'll bring the category information in and some ideas, but then we've also got information about questions we found during the analysis and content ideas. Now at the moment they're looking quite weak, but let's go back and see what we've got in here. Firstly, see that we've added the concept of Snowdonia, and then we've got a little bit of information about Snowdonia, and we've added the topic of mountains. So if I go back to my my serpent analysis here, that's where I got my mountains and my Snowdonia. I want to add bike, I can start adding different concepts. So anything that's blue here are ideas that I have not yet talked about, so I need to sort of perhaps talk about them a little bit more. And what has really gone well here is, in the if you go into the search analysis, we can see why I've got 0 in my search engine understanding, because none of the topics that I've been talking about have been identified in Google's API, NLP API, which means that I've not really been talking in a way that Google can understand. And so I'm going to need to do some work if Google's ever going to get the machine understanding that it needs for this content. If I go over to the questions, things become really, really powerful. So where we had a few questions before in some of our systems, we had trouble if we weren't finding a question. But as soon as I click on any one of these ideas, then it all breaks into life. So let's say I want to start adding some kind of ideas about hiking. Then all of a sudden we start creating masses and masses of questions. All sorts of things about, whether hiking shoes should fit, how tight should they be, why knife is important in hiking, what gear do I need to start hiking, all sorts of things coming down here, what hiking trails are open near me during COVID, all sorts of bits and pieces. And if I think there's important things that I want to add, I can just say, right, that's great, I'm going to put that in there. Why is hiking so important? How tight should hiking boots fit? I'm going to add all of those into my content brief. So now, when I go back to the content brief, then down the bottom here, we've added these concepts so that the content writer can start bringing these ideas in. We've also made it much, much easier for you to start looking at ideas on the right hand side here. So the most important missing topics in this content is things like Welsh, family, sea, activity, bike, and Snowdonia. Well, we've already talked about Snowdonia. I can click on here, check and see what's happening within Snowdonia. So now I've brought those ideas right into the content editor. I like to say Fred's done most of this, but there we go. And again, we've got questions and things here. So I could, drag those questions in and paste them on the page if I wanted to. In actual fact, you can also just drag words down here and add them in. They're currently a different color until you're ready, so you might have to play around with them. But you could, if you wanted to, just drag these ideas into your text as well. So what we're trying to do here is make it much, much more dynamic, so that you can start editing content, and a content manager can start editing content much more effectively. So I hope that you like it. I hope that you like the idea of search engine understanding. I should explain that a little bit more. It is using our natural language processing API and comparing the effectiveness of our API to Google's public natural language understanding API, definitely when Google's API is going over this content, it's not seeing concepts and ideas, and that's actually quite common. We find that most web pages, Google only understands 20 to 30% of the concepts that we do, and that's because we're an aggressive natural language processing algorithm, whereas Google's more conservative. It doesn't want to have false positives. We want, as the SEOs, to tell you what topics are there and what are not being understood in Google's NLP API. So I hope you like it. I hope it makes sense. And please recommend it to your friends. We think that we've got one of the best content optimization tools now that's out there. And if you think there's anything that we need to add, please let us know in the comments. Cheers.